Written by MortifyMore. This is one of those campfire stories that just exist. Ones that seem to leave the darkness of forests and sit down at crackling campfires. The characters and settings are different, but that wrongness in each retelling never changes. Of course, it isn't my story. I'm not involved in its roots or current cast, just a wretched retelling. I break it out after cold night s'mores, hoping to infect some of the scouts with goosebumps. But sometimes I get a few adults too. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, where I'm left with a dying flame, I tell myself the story and feel those jitters too. Route 27 cuts through Daniel Boone National Forest like a winding snake amidst tidal waves of ivy. The green hills bobbing up and down and filling with mist before the orange morn. You'll know what I mean when I say it's overgrown. So overgrown that man's structures are covered in blankets of emerald ivy. Even the ivy strangles ivy. I've driven through Route 27 a few times, and on one occasion I saw an abandoned truck that looked like a chia pet. At the next bar, I overheard someone saying that they had to leave the truck out there overnight for a part, and he wasn't sure how he'd take it back from the world's reclamation. It wouldn't be correct to say the forest can hide just about anything. And as a result, there's plenty of bad mojo surrounding the place. There's local legends of strange things in the forest, especially at those hours where the mist begins to rise, a few hours before the sun sings. These legends range from strange lights, blues and reds and yellows, to apparitions or strange creatures that seem to sink into the shadows. On one occasion, a man lost his dog in the woods, only to have two identical dogs return to him in the same night. But there's one story that's more than just strange. It's downright terrifying. Locals know to stay away from Route 27 after midnight, and even the truckers who pick up stories here and there know it. But sometimes they don't, or they're on a tight schedule and they don't want to settle for the night. So they travel through the forest on that lonesome road, letting the jitterbugs crawl up their backs and praying nothing comes for them in the night. Usually, nothing does. But one particular man found himself in the middle of Route 27 with a broken down truck. His name was Rodney, R.R. Rooney, and he worked for an office supply company that needed to get to Cincinnati the next morning. He had a stint in Corbin and was already pushing it when he started up Route 27 around 1:30 a.m. And of course, because that's how things go, his semi had an engine failure and stopped dead in the middle of the Ivy Ocean. Rooney made a call out to the nearby city, but nobody could get him out until the next day, and that his employers would just have to understand. They told him to get some sleep and lock his doors, and not to leave the vehicle for any reason. Rooney wasn't a superstitious guy, but he had bad experiences with random bikers and thugs rolling by. So he took the advice seriously without realizing the thing he should have been looking for came from the forest, not the road. It was around 4 a.m. when Rooney was woken up by a strange sound. He wasn't sure if the time was accurate because his clocks read 4 when the situation ended too. But what he did know was the mist had come up and made it look like his semi sank in a pool of gray water. From far off, Rooney heard what sounded like metal screeching, like some maniacal machine going haywire through the forest. It screeched and screamed and sent shivers up his spine, sounding similar to a fork scraping a plate times 1,000. The trucker swore he thought he was hearing an amplified car crash and waited for the telltale smashing of metal on wood and rock. But it never came. The screeching started to move closer, then abruptly stopped about 100 feet off, the source obscured by the misty forest. Then Rooney saw a shape slink out from the trees. Rooney would go on to say he felt in a fever dream, one where something feels similar enough that you don't immediately panic, but there's enough wrongness in subtle ways that puts you on edge. And even after you wake up, you're not entirely sure if you're awake. It's a feeling like everything in the house is shifted an inch, close enough to the original that you don't take notice, but different enough that you start hanging your toes or reaching for the wrong thing. So when the pale thing came out of the trees, Rooney wasn't scared. He saw the familiar human shape, the arms and 2 legs and head standing on the shoulders. Even its walk was vaguely familiar. But then Rooney began to see those fever dream details. The body stretched taller. The arms were a bit too long. The legs had some extra joints. Its walk seemed forced, as if it wasn't sure how to walk completely. And as it came more into focus, Rooney began to realize this dream was quickly devolving into a nightmare. The thing managed to stumble up to the truck's door. It was able to look inside the truck, or it would have been, had it any eyes. Yet it must have been able to sense something as it scanned the inside, stopping right on the terrified Rooney. No lips covered the pine needle teeth jutting from smooth jaws. Then all at once that same little scream sundered Rooney's ears, and he watched as the truck's door was torn off its hinges and flew out into the mist. The thing stood in full focus. Rooney had never seen anything like it. He didn't care if it was supernatural or extraterrestrial or hell-birthed. He felt his skin roll up like scraped wood, and to save his sanity, he chalked it up to alcoholic hallucinations, despite him not having a drink in 3 days. The thing then reached in with its arms, pale and hairless, and gently grabbed Rooney by the shoulders. Then with incredible strength, it lifted him from the truck and cradled him like a babbling baby. It smelled like flowers, damp and limp flowers. Flowers that were swept away in great black floods and found their way to bleak swamps, yet retained enough of their sweet smell to be hinted at, like recalled dementia-lost dreams. The thing took him deep into the forest. It had a den of sorts, way past the misty trees where nobody would know, and in the pitch-black night underneath the thick canopy of trees and vines, Rooney could only be still as the thing carried him towards its makeshift home. But he felt a burst of panic when he felt wet flaps brush against his face, like damp curtains drenched with dew and summer drizzles. But what caused the panic wasn't the wetness, it was the taste of said wetness. In the second it brushed against his face, he tasted harsh copper, and that taste instantly took him back to bar fights he had years ago. The fights that left his nose broken and leaking streams of blood. The taste he got now was of blood. The curtains were skins, he realized. The thing decorated its place with skins. That, and the next part, I don't tell the scouts. I just skip over them. But when a bunch of the guys come down here to the bonfire for a few beers and want something to ignite their adrenaline, I let them know the full story, because the story's always been there, waiting for new visitors. The thing put the bumbling and shivering trucker down and began to strip him. In a few minutes, he stood naked, cold, and beyond the point of forming words. He blubbered out cries and whines and knew for sure he'd be hanging on the branches soon. He wondered how the thing flayed skin and began to sob. With soft caresses, the thing rubbed a slick palm across his body, and he got the feeling it could feel deeper than just his skin. It left nothing untouched. It had no preferences nor pervish actions. It was a surgeon looking for the cut. Something happened that, to this day, those who hear the story don't quite understand, and it makes you wonder how Rooney felt. Maybe Rooney's tattoo-free skin wasn't interesting enough, or the thing had a change of heart. Maybe it felt pity for the babbling and shivering Rooney. The thing stopped touching him and picked him back up and began to walk. He felt the flayed skin again, now all over his body like the lick of some cadaverous hound, and continued to shiver in the mist's cold as his abductor continued out of the forest to the road. The truck still had its driver's side door torn off, and the thing placed him back into the truck, then started off back to the forest, never to be seen again. Rooney lay there, feeling the brush of air on his left naked side, his skin gleaming in the moonlight from the blood and sweat and tears that managed to crawl across his goosebump-rich skin. In a stupor of pure fear and inability to reason, he fell asleep, thinking about the thing's teeth and the smell of waterlogged flowers. And he wondered how fresh that skin must have been to be so wet. In the morning, the mechanic drove down just to find a passed-out naked man covered in dried blood with the torn truck door 20 feet away. And he, naturally, called the police. Rooney was placed in a mental hospital for his troubles, and eventually was let go for good behavior. He has gone on to live a normal life, and has even driven down Route 27 again. But he avoids that patch that cuts through Daniel Boone like the plague. And when people ask him why, he stutters and the look of terror comes back to him. Sometimes he gets the story out, in patches of coherent thought and manic heavy breaths. He's even been on a few late-night radio shows to talk about it. I'm sure anybody can find it online now. And those that have heard his story wonder if it's true or not. The thing, as far as I know, has never been seen again. But sometimes dens of skins have been found, long since dried and abandoned, and the footprints are a little bit off. Maybe those awful places have always been there. So, who can say? Is there something out there flaying flesh and slaying steel, eyeless with anglerfish teeth? Personally, I don't know, but I wouldn't drive down Route 27 past midnight. And if you do find yourself on that misty road where the vines feed on moonlight and the overgrowth hides things ancient and horrible, you may meet something that's always been there, waiting for somebody new to tell its story. Thank you for listening. You can probably handle another horror story, right?